The year is 1914, but this is not the history you know. On the blood-soaked trenches of the Rhine theater, the Imperial Army is locked in a brutal war of attrition against the Republic. Magic exists here, utilized by elite mages who fight like airborne artillery. Amidst the mud, chaos, and flying shrapnel, a new unit arrives to reinforce the line. Leading them is 2nd Lieutenant Tanya Decapitation. She possesses striking blue eyes, blonde hair, and the physical stature of a 9-year-old child. But behind that innocent facade lies a calculating, ruthless tactical mind that values absolute corporate efficiency above human life. In this grim environment, military logic rules supreme. As the Republican mages launch a massive offensive, the sheer intensity of the bombardment breaks the morale of 2 Imperial mages under Tanya's command. They openly question her orders, frantically pleading for a tactical retreat, rather than executing them on the spot for blatant insubordination. Tanya displays what appears to be a rare moment of maternal mercy. She calmly strips them of their frontline duties and reassigns them to a stationary pillbox fortification safely located in the rear. With her remaining squad, including the terrified rookie Victoria Serebriakov, Tanya calmly prepares to hold the line against overwhelming odds. What follows next is a breathtaking masterclass in aerial warfare. Tanya launches herself into the sky, utilizing powerful magic to dismantle the enemy vanguard with terrifying precision. She treats the battlefield not as a horrific conflict, but as a corporate ledger that needs balancing. When the remaining Republican squadron attempts to overwhelm her by forcing her into the stratosphere, Tanya outclimbs them, charges her computation orb, and fires down a devastating high-tier explosive spell. The resulting magical blast creates a massive mushroom cloud, completely vaporizing the enemy forces and single-handedly securing the front line. The line firmly holds, but the true horror of the day is revealed back at camp. Visha approaches Tanya holding a clipboard, gloomily delivering a casualty report. She reveals that a stray enemy artillery shell scored a direct hit on the rear pillbox, completely killing the 2 insubordinate mages Tanya had benched. Visha is deeply shaken, genuinely believing it was a tragic, unlucky twist of fate. Tanya, however, smiles coldly to herself. A pillbox is a stationary target with fixed coordinates. She knew the enemy's artillery trajectories perfectly and deliberately used a bureaucratic reassignment to execute them legally. As the dark smoke clears over the Rhine, the Republican forces learn to fear the miniature silhouette in the sky, officially known as the Devil of the Rhine. To understand how a 9-year-old girl became the most terrifying soldier on the continent, we must look entirely outside of this magical world. In modern-day Tokyo, our protagonist was a cold, fiercely analytical human resources manager who operated strictly on corporate metrics. He optimized company efficiency by ruthlessly firing underperforming employees without a shred of empathy, viewing human emotions as mere bugs. This clinical detachment proves fatal when a disgruntled, terminated employee shoves him into the path of an oncoming subway train. In the final millisecond before impact, time freezes entirely and a cosmic presence speaking through the crowd confronts the salaryman. Rather than panicking, the manager uses rigid logic to dismiss the entity, labeling it being X and calling God unscientific. He argues that humanity only turns to religion when desperate, insulated by modern economic stability and advanced scientific safety nets. Amused and insulted by this absolute defiance, Being X decides to run a harsh psychological experiment to force his submission. The manager is reincarnated into alternate early 20th century Europe as Tanya Decapitation, a destitute orphan girl inside a religious empire. Even in a toddler body, the modern corporate mind remains completely intact, quickly calculating a strict long-term survival strategy. When routine medical screening reveals an anomalous, absurdly high magical aptitude, she maps out a flawless professional military roadmap. She voluntarily enlists in the academy at age 8, aiming to secure a safe administrative desk job in the rear. Deployed to the brutal Rhine front, Tanya is ordered to hold a desperate delaying action completely alone against an advancing enemy mage battalion. Calculating that a retreat means immediate execution for desertion, she chooses high-risk engagement to preserve her personal career asset. She aggressively dismantles the enemy forces with terrifying magical precision, but as her mana reserves deplete, and she is completely cornered, she executes a final, desperate tactical calculation. Tanya intentionally triggers a massive, catastrophic self-destruction spell utilizing her own computation orb, fully intending to liquidate the remaining hostile squadron in a blinding explosion. Instead of perishing in the fiery detonation, she miraculously survives the blast due to her anomalous magical shield strength. This extreme display of apparent sacrificial patriotism thoroughly stuns the high command, earning her a prestigious medal and permanently locking her to the dangerous front lines. Having survived the brutal meat grinder of the Rhine through sheer calculation, Tanya is awarded the prestigious Silver Wings Assault Badge. Along with the medal comes exactly what her corporate spreadsheet demanded: a formal transfer away from the front lines to a seemingly safe rearguard assignment in the capital. She is tasked with field testing the Elenium Type 95, an experimental computation orb engineered by the eccentric and fanatical chief developer, Dr. Adelheid von Schugel. To Tanya, this looks like the ultimate corporate loop, an administrative engineering post with zero workplace hazards. The dream job instantly devolves into an absolute nightmare. The Type 95 is designed to revolutionize aerial magic by operating 4 distinct spell cores simultaneously, but the prototype is fundamentally unstable. During high-altitude trial flights, the orb repeatedly enters catastrophic, near-lethal detonation sequences that nearly vaporize Tanya in mid-air. Realizing this assignment carries an unacceptable risk to her physical asset survival, Tanya uses strict bureaucratic regulations to compose highly critical technical reports, aggressively recommending the project be frozen so she can safely wash her hands of the dangerous endeavor. Being X refuses to let his stubborn creation escape the crucible so easily. That night, time freezes entirely inside Tanya's quarters, and the cosmic entity takes direct control of a wooden nutcracker doll sitting on her desk. Being X openly berates her lack of genuine faith despite her near-death experiences. Tanya remains completely unrepentant, coldly arguing that her survival is due to structural luck and human intellect rather than divine grace. The next morning, a manic Dr. Schugel claims he received a literal holy revelation from God, suddenly perfecting the orb's design by intentionally stripping out all safety limiters and forcing Tanya into one final highly volatile flight test. High in the stratosphere, the Type 95 goes critical, trapping Tanya in an irreversible lethal freefall. As the cores prepare to detonate and obliterate her, Being X pauses time once more to deliver a brutal ultimatum: acknowledge the creator and pray, or be instantly turned to ash. Choosing survival over pride, Tanya forces herself to recite a superficial prayer. The divine intervention stabilizes the explosion, granting her unprecedented magical output. However, Tanya realizes the horrific catch: the orb only functions if she praises God, forcing her mind into an involuntary religious ecstasy. Following her miraculous stratospheric stabilization of the cursed Type 95 computation orb, Tanya successfully secures a peaceful temporary educational rotation at the prestigious Imperial War College in the capital city of Barun. For the modern corporate salaryman who remains trapped inside a young child's body, this refined academic environment represents an absolute bureaucratic paradise. She easily excels as a flawless model cadet, enjoying fine dining, intellectual safety, and comfortable, secure accommodations entirely removed from the muddy, violent trenches. Tanya firmly believes she has finally out-bureaucratized Being X, safely positioning herself for a permanent, comfortable administrative desk job far away from combat. However, her peaceful academic bubble shatters completely during a fateful dinner meeting with the brilliant Brigadier General von Zatour. The strategic leader is currently assessing the Empire's long-term global vulnerabilities and eagerly seeks the unique perspective of this highly decorated young combat prodigy. Utilizing her advanced knowledge of modern real-world history, Tanya delivers a chillingly detached macroeconomic analysis of their geopolitical landscape. She explicitly warns Zatour that the current localized border conflicts will inevitably expand into a massive, terrible, multi-front war of total attrition, explaining that traditional swift campaigns are completely useless against full industrial national mobilization. To survive this impending industrial meat grinder, Tanya outlines a highly progressive tactical solution to the Imperial General Staff. She strongly recommends the immediate formation of a small, hyper-mobile rapid response, elite mage battalion capable of deploying across multiple global theaters to constantly plug dangerous operational gaps. In her calculating corporate mind, this advanced structural proposal represents the ultimate personal safety play. She fully intends for High Command to build this specialized unit, appoint another officer to lead it into danger, and leave her safely behind in the capital to comfortably manage the primary administrative planning and routine paperwork. However, her terrifying corporate competence backfires with absolute devastating precision. Zatour is so profoundly impressed by her visionary strategic insight that he immediately fast-tracks the entire project through headquarters. Instead of leaving her in the safety of Barun, High Command officially places First Lieutenant Tanya de Gurachev in direct operational command of organizing, training, and personally leading this hazardous new vanguard. Her own flawless professional logic has accidentally engineered the exact military weapon that drags her straight back to the active front lines, proving that her master plans for an easy life are systematically ruined by her unmatched tactical genius. Determined to delay her deployment as long as possible, Tanya subjects the hundreds of battalion applicants to a brutally intense corporate-style weeding process. She designs a merciless training regimen of continuous live-fire drills, sleepless marches, and psychological pressure, fully expecting every single candidate to voluntarily quit due to sheer exhaustion. However, her harsh methods produce the exact opposite result. Instead of breaking, the remaining 36 mages coalesce into a hyper-capable, fanatically loyal elite fighting force, proudly forming the newly designated 203rd Air Mage Battalion with the capable Visha as her personal trusted adjutant. With their sudden operational readiness established, Tanya and her formidable new corporate asset are immediately deployed to the southeastern border. The neighboring Daxian Grand Duchy, foolishly miscalculating the Empire multi-front strains, has launched a massive surprise invasion with an army of over 500,000 soldiers. To Tanya clinical mind, this primitive enemy force is not a terrifying threat, but rather an incredibly obsolete business competitor relying on completely outdated combat strategies that are fundamentally unsuited for the realities of a modern, highly advanced, magically amplified industrial conflict, making their massive numbers entirely irrelevant on the contemporary fluid battlefield. The ensuing clash serves as a stark, undeniable demonstration of absolute tactical and technological asymmetry. Dacia sends rows of tightly packed, unshielded infantry marching forward without any air support, treating 20th century warfare like a 19th century parade. Hovering completely out of reach in the sky, the 203rd Battalion rains down devastating long-range artillery spells with systematic, machine-like regularity. Tanya coordinates the aerial slaughter without a single hint of emotional hesitation, viewing the advancing lines of enemy troops as mere underperforming data points that must be quickly cleared from her global military accounting balance sheet. Following the utter annihilation of the vanguard, Tanya leads a daring surgical strike directly against the Daxian Capital Command Center. Adhering strictly to international wartime regulations, she broadcasts a formal declaration of attack, which the confused enemy leadership completely dismisses as a childish prank. This bureaucratic compliance clears her legal ledger, allowing her to obliterate their primary military headquarters and main weapons factory with absolute impunity. The entire Daxian invasion collapses in less than a single day. While Tanya celebrates this effortless, bloodless corporate victory for her unit, her flawless performance guarantees she remains the Empire premier frontline crisis manager. The global conflict expands rapidly into the freezing trenches of the Northern Front. Here, the Imperial military remains locked in a grueling winter campaign against the Legadonia Entente alliance. For Tanya, this frozen wasteland represents a severe operational deficit, heavily draining her personnel's physical stamina. To maximize defensive efficiency under these sub-zero conditions, the 203rd Battalion is ordered to hold an overextended, highly volatile sector against overwhelming numbers. Tanya views this deployment not as a heroic stand, but as a poorly managed logistical nightmare mistakenly forced upon her by the elite Imperial High Command's own administrative incompetence. The enemy forces launch a sudden offensive to shatter the lines before blizzards solidify. Facing overwhelming numbers, Tanya is forced to unleash the experimental Type 95 orb to repel the advancing waves. This triggers Being X's insidious psychological curse, forcing her into an involuntary state of religious ecstasy, where she must loudly praise God to unlock the device's immense power. This divinely amplified counterattack completely annihilates the enemy vanguard. During this chaotic holding action, she first encounters Captain Anson Su, a traditional veteran whose stubborn idealism directly clashes with her metrics-driven pragmatism, convincing her that a passive defense will eventually completely deplete her valuable military assets. She scans the geography and identifies the enemy's primary logistical lifeline, the coastal supply port of Norden. Neutralizing this single node will trigger a total collapse of the Alliance's offensive capabilities. Rather than waiting for formal permission from the sluggish leadership in the distant Imperial capital, Tanya exploits her battalion's unique speed. She initiates an unannounced, deep-penetration strategic bombing raid directly against the unsuspecting naval facility. Her primary operational goal is clean industrial liquidation. By destroying their resource pipeline, she can force a premature end to the active northern conflict without exposing her troops to prolonged, unnecessary attrition on the cold, muddy battlefield. This surgical aerial strike achieves total tactical asymmetry. Drawing upon the immense power of her Type 95 computation orb, Tanya ascends far above the clouds to entirely bypass harbor defense radar. Her mages rain down highly concentrated explosive spells, vaporizing warehouses, ammunition reserves, and docked transport vessels. The resulting devastation breaks the back of the enemy's offensive, forcing a chaotic retreat across the territory. Tanya's calculated refusal to fail secures an absolute victory, permanently cementing her status as the Empire's supreme frontline crisis manager, an ironic professional outcome that absolutely guarantees she will remain indefinitely trapped in active, violent theater combat. To decisively crush the remaining resistance, the General Staff coordinates a massive, joint amphibious operation targeting Orfjord. This complex maneuver requires flawless coordination, as vulnerable naval vessels must sail directly into the firing paths of fortified coastal artillery mounts. Tanya views this naval push as another precarious corporate hazard, where any mistake leads to heavy capital destruction. To safeguard the fleet's arrival, the specialized battalion is ordered to execute a perilous, low-visibility drop into enemy territory. Their specific corporate mandate is to systematically eliminate those fortified defense installations before the primary fleet ships safely reach the designated landing shore. Utilizing experimental rebreather mechanics to plummet from an altitude that completely evades early warning tracking devices, the soldiers plunge silently into the rocky peaks overlooking the bay. Tanya directs the ambush with absolute cold precision, relying on total stealth to catch the garrison off guard. The unit rapidly dismantled the gun emplacements, neutralizing the immediate crossfire hazard and opening a secure maritime corridor for the advancing armada. However, this fluid, highly successful operational triumph is abruptly disrupted when an elite enemy counter-squad arrives to reclaim the localized airspace, forcing the young lieutenant into an immediate, incredibly fierce, high-stakes vertical aerial dogfight. Spearheading the hostile enemy counter-offensive is the vengeful veteran leader, driven by a desperate compulsion to safeguard his collapsing nation. The resulting confrontation narrows down to a raw, unyielding duel between opposing styles. The adversary fights with passionate, nationalistic fervor, whereas Tanya retaliates with detached corporate efficiency, categorizing the opponent as an inefficient operational bottleneck that must be permanently expunged from the Empire's regional grid. Relying on the supernatural output of her cursed hardware, she methodically deconstructs his outmoded airborne flight maneuvers, fracturing his personal defenses and delivering a fatal strike that completely ended his active military career. Plummeting into the abyss, the defeated officer left his signature trench gun, which Tanya cold-bloodedly claims as a functional piece of premium field equipment. Stripped of leadership, the remaining hostile air units break formation, allowing the Imperial Marine Force to claim the entire coastline. The northern campaign ends with absolute dominance for the fatherland, fully nullifying the alliance. Yet, standing over the conquered harbor, Tanya is profoundly frustrated. Her flawless execution of a dangerous task has merely proven her value, ensuring that instead of a desk job, she will remain indefinitely bound to the front line as their primary crisis weapon. The Empire's logistics face an internal threat when the strategic transit city of Arin erupts in an armed civilian insurrection, covertly orchestrated by Republican special operatives. This rebellion completely halts the main supply train route to the Western Front, creating a catastrophic structural bottleneck for Imperial High Command. Tanya assesses this crisis from a purely corporate perspective, an unmanaged internal strike that threatens the core company workflow. Her battalion is deployed alongside heavy artillery regiments to resolve the conflict and secure the vital transportation hub. Rather than launching a messy, high-casualty urban sweep through hostile streets, Tanya utilizes her comprehensive knowledge of international wartime law to engineer an absolute legal shield for her upcoming actions. She points out that because the rebelling citizens are taking up arms without wearing official military uniforms or identifying markings, they do not qualify as lawful combatants under existing treaties. They are legally classified as irregular partisans, meaning the standard humanitarian protections governing urban warfare are completely null and void. She formally issues a strict automated evacuation deadline over the radio waves, which the entrenched Republican forces intentionally suppress to keep the civilian population inside as shields. Once the legal clock expires, Tanya orders her mages and the waiting artillery batteries to initiate a systematic block-by-block firebombing of the entire city. She treats the horrific eradication of Arin not as an act of emotional malice, but as a mandatory liquidation of a thoroughly compromised asset. From the safety of the sky, the 203rd Battalion coordinate the precise barrage, raining down magical incendiary charges that transform the grand architecture into a roaring furnace, ensuring total elimination of the hidden resistance. The flames reduce Arin to complete ash, successfully reopening the vital Imperial supply lines at an incredible human cost. While Visha and the regular mages look down at the smoking ruins with deep psychological horror, Tanya remains entirely untroubled, calmly reviewing her unblemished compliance records. She has perfectly protected the Empire's Western logistics while maintaining absolute legal immunity, demonstrating that modern corporate bureaucracy can be far more terrifying than raw battlefield rage. Yet, This chillingly flawless administrative resolution only deepens her reputation as an unfeeling monster, ensuring the general staff will keep her permanently locked at the dangerous vanguard of their rapidly expanding global conflict, completely ruining her ongoing dreams of a safe, comfortable, highly lucrative administrative desk job in the rear. In an ambitious bid to end the Western stalemate permanently, Lieutenant General von Rudersdorf devises a master strategic plan known as the Grand Encirclement. The goal is to trap the primary fighting strength of the Republican Army within a colossal, localized net. However, executing this high-risk maneuver requires a highly disciplined force to act as vulnerable bait, intentionally drawing the overconfident enemy deep into the designated Imperial kill zone. Because of their unmatched field mobility and survival metrics, Tanya's specialized flight battalion is hand-picked to perform this incredibly dangerous, high-pressure sacrificial assignment. Tanya immediately recognizes the severe tactical dangers of playing the decoy, yet she executes the maneuver with absolute administrative precision. Instead of a chaotic rout, she orchestrates a flawless, mathematically calculated fighting retreat across the active combat sector. Her mages engage the advancing enemy vanguard, just enough to maintain aggressive pursuit, then systematically fall back while absorbing immense psychological and physical pressure. She manages her unit's defensive shields and ammunition expenditure with robotic clarity, ensuring her soldiers sustain zero casualties while perfectly luring the unsuspecting Republican main forces into the massive hidden trap. The trap springs with devastating absolute finality as the main Imperial Army closes the massive geographical loop, completely surrounding the overextended Republican forces. The resulting tactical enclosure transforms the battlefield into a massive industrial slaughterhouse, entirely crippling the Republic's frontline military capabilities in a single afternoon. While the Empire celebrates this brilliant strategic victory, Tanya remains deeply analytical, quietly calculating her unit's efficiency ratings. She views the massive military victory merely as a successful operational cycle that should finally earn her a peaceful administrative reprieve from active duty. Across the ocean, Being X introduces a highly volatile new variable to shatter Tanya's pursuit of absolute safety. Mary Sue, the grieving daughter of the fallen Captain Anson Sue, officially enlists in the Allied forces, driven by intense personal vengeance. Being X secretly grants this young girl an immense, mathematically impossible reservoir of raw magical output, turning her into a theological weapon specifically designed to hunt the devil of the Rhine. This unexpected emotional variable sets up a terrifying future collision, proving that even when Tanya wins a flawless military victory, her divine tormentor will constantly engineer new global threats to keep her trapped indefinitely within this escalating cycle of brutal warfare, making her long-sought-after civilian desk job an impossible, distant, terrifying, and completely fading winter mirage. Following the successful encirclement of the main Republican forces, via the Empire's grand rotating door strategy, High Command moves to finalize this corporate takeover. To prevent the enemy from reorganizing, they authorize a high-risk decapitation strike aimed directly at the Republican Supreme Headquarters. This critical operations directive requires absolute tactical speed to exploit the crushing hammer and anvil pressure closing in on the front lines. Because traditional flight methods are far too slow for this surprise window, Tanya's specialized battalion is volunteered to test a highly volatile piece of aviation technology, rocket-assisted transport units designed for rapid vertical insertion. Tanya views this rocket deployment as a dangerous mechanical hazard, yet she coordinates the high-altitude launch with her usual mathematical precision. Strapped into these unstable experimental boosters, the 203rd Battalion launches into the upper atmosphere, screaming across the front lines at unprecedented velocities before plunging straight down onto the unsuspecting enemy command facility. The tactical surprise is completely absolute. Tanya and her elite soldiers breach the headquarters with robotic efficiency, treating the high-ranking staff officers not as human combatants, but as an obsolete management board that must be completely liquidated to clear the market. The interior of the headquarters becomes a scene of clinical liquidation. Tanya leads the systematic sweep through the administrative offices, using concentrated magical fire to eliminate the enemy's top military leadership and shatter their strategic communications network. This rapid neutralization of the high command structure causes the remaining Republican front lines to instantly collapse into total, uncoordinated anarchy. However, the sweeping purge suffers a critical operational error. The charismatic and highly defiant General DeLugo carefully manages to successfully evacuate the facility just moments before Tanya's team secures the primary sector, slipping away into the night to organize a future resistance. While the Empire celebrates the apparent total victory on the Western Front, Tanya remains deeply frustrated by this incomplete liquidation. She understands that allowing the top executive to escape means the corporate enemy entity has not been completely dissolved, merely displaced. Her meticulous operational performance has once again brought the fatherland to the brink of global dominance, but her persistent hope for a quiet administrative retirement remains entirely unfulfilled. Instead of a safe desk job, her terrifying tactical efficiency guarantees she will remain the premier crisis manager for this expanding war, binding her to the brutal front lines indefinitely without peaceful administrative reprieve. The Western Front reaches a deceptive tactical climax as the Republic's grand capital officially falls, declaring an open city status to prevent its absolute physical destruction. While the imperial citizenry loudly celebrates this apparent total victory, the Imperial High Command immediately shifts its entire administrative focus toward organizing complex post-war occupation strategies and diplomatic asset distribution. However, Tanya's analytical mind instantly detects an immense structural flaw in these premature celebrations. She recognizes that a country has not truly surrendered until its core military capacity is thoroughly dismantled, viewing the festive atmosphere at headquarters as dangerous corporate negligence that threatens their long-term security. Her dark tactical suspicions are validated when intelligence reveals that the surviving Republic Navy and military remnants are actively executing a massive maritime withdrawal. Instead of surrendering, they are consolidating their remaining forces at the northern port of Brest to prepare a cross-ocean evacuation. They intend to establish a sovereign government in exile in North Africa to sustain the global conflict indefinitely. To Tanya, an unresolved war represents an ongoing, inefficient corporate liability that will inevitably drag her back to the active combat theater later, completely disrupting her long-term timeline for a secure administrative desk retirement in the rear. Driven by pure professional self-interest to close this active ledger, Tanya urgently contacts Imperial Command, desperately attempting to persuade her superiors to authorize an immediate, crushing, preemptive strike against Brest. She argues with fierce, undeniable logic that allowing the enemy to slip away completely compromises their strategic gains. To her intense frustration, the bureaucratic leadership flatly denies her operational request. Paralyzed by the delicate political climate of the impending diplomatic armistice, the high-ranking generals prioritize rigid administrative protocols over absolute frontline victory, forcing her elite unit to stand down while the opportunity to end the war decisively completely evaporates. The final operational blow falls as the official armistice order is formally issued across all channels, legally compelling an immediate cessation of all hostilities. This hard bureaucratic boundary completely freezes the active theater, permanently locking Tanya's entire airborne battalion in place while the retreating enemy successfully escapes without further incident. She is left to experience a dark, somber reflection on her complete loss of personal agency within the military machine. She realizes that the Empire's short-sighted administrative gridlock has perfectly preserved the enemy's potential for future resistance, precisely ensuring that her desired safe desk job remains an entirely impossible, distant, and completely unachievable winter dream. The Empire basks in a false sense of absolute triumph, celebrating a hollow peace while the global market silently shifts against them. In the capital, citizens and high-ranking generals rejoice over the successful conclusion of the Western campaign, foolishly believing the war is won. However, Tanya's hyper-rational mind identifies this peaceful intermission as a dangerous illusion. Across the ocean, General de Lugo has successfully established the Republican government in exile in North Africa, while the Allied Kingdom and the massive Federation begin mobilizing their vast reserves. The conflict has merely expanded into a global theater of total attrition. Summoned to deliver a tactical presentation before the Supreme General Staff, Tanya uses the opportunity to issue a fiercely logical, sobering warning. She explains to the celebration-blinded commanders that traditional military victories mean absolutely nothing when dealing with human irrationality and ideological fanaticism. She accurately forecasts that their enemies will never accept a structural defeat on paper because they are driven by emotional and nationalistic variables that defy economic sense. Tanya strongly advises against expanding their occupied territories, urging the High Command to consolidate their current assets instead. To her intense frustration, her brilliant administrative warnings are completely dismissed. Realizing that her superiors are blinded by corporate hubris, and that being X will continuously manipulate global events to sustain the conflict, Tanya undergoes a profound mental realignment. She completely abandons her long-standing quest to secure a comfortable, safe administrative desk job in the rear guard. She accepts the harsh reality that as long as the petty cosmic entity dictates the board, true peace is an unachievable metric. If she wants to survive long enough to enjoy a quiet civilian life, she cannot hide from the fire. She must become the ultimate, indispensable weapon that breaks the divine script. Reassigned to the scorching, grueling sands of the North African desert front to combat the regrouped Republican forces, Tanya stands before the elite 203rd Battalion. Instead of delivering a traditional patriotic speech, she issues a chilling declaration of absolute, unyielding defiance against the heavens. She reframes their upcoming military campaign not as a fight for the fatherland, but as a total corporate war of spite against God himself. As her mages ascend into the burning desert sky to engage the next wave of enemies, the Devil of the Rhine prepares to systematically liquidate every single divine obstacle. Thanks for watching. Check out this next video, and remember to subscribe and zap.